The HOA president actually phoned the sheriff on me for taking a swim in my own backyard lake, a lake I'd owned for 15 years before her subdivision even existed. Picture this. I'm drifting quietly in my private water at dusk, listening to loons call across the surface when police sirens slice through the evening crickets like a buzzsaw through silk. Deputy Campos rolls up my gravel drive, wearing the same confusion I felt. "Sir, I'm sorry, but I have to issue you a citation per HOA complaint," he says, trying not to smirk. Behind him, Tracy Willard waits at my property line, arms folded and that practiced smile that never reaches her frosty blue eyes. The citation, a $1,000 fine for unauthorized recreational water usage in a restricted zone. I'm standing there, dripping, staring at the paper. "Ma'am, this is my lake. I built this dock with my own hands when you were still living in California. What would you do if someone tried to control the water on your land? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I bet you've got HOA horror stories too." Little did Tracy know, I'd spent 20 years as a municipal finance director. Big mistake. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up in this mess. My name's Evan, and 3 years ago, I lost my wife, Maya, to cancer. We'd been married 22 years, and losing her felt like someone tore half my soul straight out. The grief was suffocating. You know that sensation where you can't breathe, can't think, can't picture tomorrow without them. So I did what any shattered widower would do. I moved to the middle of nowhere. Well, not exactly nowhere. I inherited my grandfather's 4-acre place in rural North Carolina, complete with a spring-fed lake that's been in our family since 1952. Grandpa built the original cabin with his own hands after coming back from Korea. And that lake saved his sanity, just like it was about to rescue mine. Picture this spot. Crystal clear water fed by underground springs, encircled by towering pines that smell like Christmas morning. Every dawn, loons call across the water while mist rises like ghosts dancing on the surface. I'd sit on the dock Grandpa built, sipping coffee from Maya's favorite mug, the one with the chipped handle she refused to toss, watching rainbow trout rise to snatch insects. The quiet was therapy. No traffic, no deadlines, just the whisper of wind through branches and the occasional splash of a jumping fish. I'd spent 20 years as municipal finance director for Millbrook County, auditing budgets and catching shady contractors who thought they could sneak inflated invoices past the city. Back then, I learned that most government harassment grows from obscure ordinances nobody bothers to challenge. Knowledge that would prove priceless when facing petty tyrants like Tracy. But after Maya died, I retired early. The lake became my refuge, my therapy, my reason to get up each morning. Then Tracy Willard happened. Like a hurricane in designer shoes, demanding to speak to Mother Nature's manager. In 2019, some developer bought the old logging road that bordered my north fence. Before I knew it, bulldozers were chewing up 100-year-old oaks, and the sound of chainsaws replaced my peaceful mornings. The smell of diesel exhaust and fresh-cut lumber drifted across my land like an industrial plague, mixing with the pine scent until it felt like a hardware store had exploded in a forest. Within 2 years, 47 McMansions sprouted like mushrooms after rain. Lakeside luxury estates, they called it, which was hilarious considering their only lake view was of my property. But hey, nothing says luxury like paying $800,000 to stare at someone else's water through your kitchen window, right? Tracy moved in from California, driving a white BMW with personalized plates reading Realtor 1 and an ego the size of Texas. She was everything you'd expect. Blonde highlights that cost more than my month of groceries. A designer purse that probably cost more than my truck. The kind of artificial smile that screams, "I've never met a homeowner's fee I didn't want to double." Within 6 months, she maneuvered herself into HOA president and kicked off a campaign to civilize us poor country folk. It began with passive-aggressive neighborly drop-ins. She'd click across my gravel driveway in stilettos, which, let me tell you, sounds like a tap dancer having a seizure, bringing store-bought cookies while remarking how my rustic cabin had such character. The overpowering perfume mixed with the natural pine breeze like a cheap air freshener in a funeral home. When I politely declined her offer to buy my land for 60 cents on the dollar, her plastic smile turned predatory. That manicured mask slipped just enough to show the calculating real estate shark beneath. The harassment started small. Complaints to the county about my unpermitted dock. I showed them permits from 2008, older than half her subdivision. Then she claimed my trout were contaminating the watershed. The environmental inspector actually laughed and said my lake was cleaner than most municipal water supplies. But Tracy had done her homework. She dug up some forgotten 1920s ordinance about recreational water usage permits, the kind of bureaucratic fossil that survives in dusty law books like a legal parasite. During my municipal days, I'd seen how these dormant rules could be weaponized against property owners who didn't know their rights. She convinced the county commissioners, conveniently her former real estate clients, to amend it retroactively. Suddenly, any lake activity within 500 feet of residential developments required HOA approval. My lake, which had existed for 70 years before her subdivision was even a glimmer in some developer's daydream, was now subject to Tracy's authority. The woman who'd lived here 18 months was trying to control water that had been in my family for 3 generations. That's when she made her first big mistake. She called the cops on a grieving widower just trying to heal in his own backyard. Bad move, Tracy. Really bad move. 2 weeks after the swimming citation, Tracy showed up at my door with reinforcements. I was sitting on my porch enjoying the morning coffee ritual that kept me sane when I heard the crunch of multiple vehicles on my gravel driveway. The smell of fresh pine mixed with something that reminded me of bureaucratic desperation, that particular blend of cheap cologne and sweaty polyester that always clings to small-time con artists. Tracy stepped out of her BMW wearing a triumphant smirk, followed by a man in an ill-fitting county inspector uniform. His name tag read Earl Morrison, and he clutched a clipboard like it was Excalibur, and he was the chosen king of petty harassment. "Mr. Harper," Tracy announced with fake sweetness, "we've received an anonymous complaint about your commercial fishing operation." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Commercial fishing?" "Lady, I stock this lake for my own recreation." Earl puffed out his chest and slapped his clipboard against his leg, a nervous tick that would have been funny if he wasn't trying to shake me down. "Sir, you'll need to show me your business license for this aquaculture facility, or I'll have to issue daily fines of $500 until you achieve compliance." I dealt with enough shady inspectors in my municipal days to know a con when I saw one. Earl had that shifty look of a used car salesman trying to sell a Honda with no engine. I played along, pulling out my property deed and fishing permits. "These are for personal use," I explained patiently. "I stock about 50 trout twice a year for my own fishing." Earl barely glanced at the paperwork. "Anonymous complaint says you're running an unlicensed commercial operation. Until you prove otherwise, this lake is shut down." That night, while Tracy probably celebrated with wine that cost more than most people's car payments, I fired up my old laptop. 20 years of municipal work had taught me that every bureaucrat leaves a paper trail, and Earl Morrison was about to have his exposed under a very bright light. The first discovery, Earl's inspector credentials had expired 2 years ago. The man threatening me with daily fines wasn't even legally authorized to inspect a lemonade stand, let alone my property. I remembered a case from my county days where a fake inspector had tried a similar trick. The key was documenting everything before they realized they'd been caught. I screenshot his expired license, filed a formal complaint with the state licensing board, and started digging deeper. A thorough search of public records revealed Earl had been conducting inspections across 3 counties using his expired credentials. This wasn't just incompetence, it was systematic fraud. Yin-Yao. When the state board contacted Earl about his unlicensed activities, he apparently had a meltdown. Word spreads fast in small counties, and I heard through the courthouse grapevine that he called Tracy in a panic, begging her to fix things. Tracy, being the strategic genius she was, decided the best defense was a good offense. 3 days later, an official-looking bill appeared in my mailbox. The Lakeside Luxury Estates HOA was now charging me a liability insurance surcharge of $500 per month for dangerous water activities. They'd backdated it to January. It was now July, so I supposedly owed $3,000. I had to admire the audacity. Tracy was basically charging me rent to swim in my own lake, the one my grandfather had dug with a borrowed bulldozer in 1952. While Earl faced a $10,000 fine and possible criminal charges for impersonating an inspector, I began researching property law precedents. Years earlier, I'd studied a landmark Supreme Court case about government overreach, Lucas v. South Carolina Coastal Council, where officials tried to ban all development on a man's coastal property. The court ruled that government can't eliminate all economically beneficial use of property without compensation. The principle was simple. They can't force you to pay fees for legal activities on your own land. Armed with this precedent, I filed a preliminary injunction in county court to stop Tracy's shakedown. But I also had a surveyor come out to confirm my property boundaries. Call it intuition from dealing with shady characters for decades. The survey results were like Christmas morning, and winning the lottery rolled into one. Tracy's precious subdivision encroached 15 feet onto state forest land. 3 of the McMansions, including one owned by her cousin, Dean, were technically trespassing on public property. I made an anonymous tip to the state forestry department. Sometimes the best revenge is just following the rules and watching your enemies hang themselves with their own rope. Within a week, 3 HOA houses received violation notices for illegal land use. The potential fines: $50,000 per structure, plus removal costs. Suddenly, Tracy's measly $3,000 bill looked like pocket change. The next morning, Tracy stormed across my property line like Sherman marching through Georgia, except Sherman probably had better manners. Her face was red enough to stop traffic, and she was screaming about harassment and ruining property values loud enough to scare the loons off my lake and probably wake the dead in the next county. "You think you're so smart?" she shrieked, jabbing a manicured finger in my direction. "I'm going to sue you for intentional infliction of emotional distress." I calmly handed her the court papers for my injunction hearing, still warm from the printer. "See you in court, Tracy. Bring your checkbook and maybe a good lawyer, you're going to need both." Her mouth opened and closed like one of my trout gasping for air. The sound of her heels retreating on the gravel was sweeter than any loon song. Tracy clearly hadn't learned anything from the Earl debacle, because 2 weeks later she decided to escalate to psychological warfare. And by psychological warfare, I mean she called Channel 7 News. I was feeding my trout their morning meal. Yes, I had a feeding schedule. Don't judge when I heard the rumble of a news van climbing my gravel driveway. The crunch of gravel under those heavy tires sounded like someone stepping on bubble wrap made of rocks. Out stepped reporter Melissa Torres, followed by a cameraman who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Behind them, Tracy emerged from her BMW in what I can only describe as her concerned citizen costume. Conservative blazer, minimal makeup, and an expression that suggested she was holding back tears over the tragic plight of endangered property values. "Mr. Harper," Melissa called out, approaching with that practiced reporter stride, "we're here about concerns that your lake activities are threatening the community's water supply." I looked at Tracy, who was strategically positioning herself in the background with 3 neighbors she'd clearly recruited as props. Their faces carried the kind of staged concern you see in pharmaceutical ads, right before they list the side effects. "Ma'am," I said, setting down my fish food, "I'm not sure what concerns you're referring to." The questions came fast. Was I aware of the environmental risks? Did I care about children's safety? What about property values? Tracy had clearly fed Melissa a list of loaded questions designed to make me look like some kind of ecological menace. But here's the thing about spending 20 years in municipal meetings. You learn to stay calm when people are trying to make you look bad on camera. I invited the crew to test my lake water right then and there. The look on Tracy's face when I dipped a clear glass straight from the lake and drank it while locking eyes with the camera was priceless, like watching someone realize they'd brought a squirt gun to a tank fight. "This water has been tested by County Environmental Services 3 times in the past year," I explained calmly, pulling out a folder thicker than a phone book. "It's cleaner than most municipal supplies. Would you like to see the reports?" I handed Melissa copies of everything environmental inspection reports showing pristine water quality, historical property deeds proving my water rights dating back to 1892, county permits that were current and valid, and photos documenting Tracy's subdivision encroachment onto state land. You could practically see the story shifting in real time. Melissa's questions became sharper, focused more on why Tracy would make claims that didn't match the evidence. Tracy started sweating despite the October breeze carrying the scent of burning leaves down the valley. "Mrs. Willard," Melissa asked, turning the camera toward her. Do you have any evidence supporting your claims about water contamination? Tracy's response was a masterclass in verbal gymnastics. She stammered about potential risks and community concerns, while her eye started twitching a tell I'd seen countless times in budget meetings with crooked contractors. That's when I decided to share what I'd learned about Tracy's track record. During my years auditing municipal contracts, I'd built a network of contacts across several states. A few phone calls revealed that Tracy Willard wasn't exactly new to neighborhood destruction. Melissa, I said, you might want to look into Mrs. Willard's previous communities in California and Arizona. Interesting patterns emerge when you follow the paper trail. Tracy went pale beneath her foundation. She knew I'd done my homework. The interview ended with Tracy demanding equal time to present the HOA's perspective. Melissa agreed to a follow-up segment, which turned out to be Tracy's second big mistake. While I prepared for round 2 by gathering even more documentation, Tracy spent the week calling in favors. The station manager turned out to be Jim Parker, who'd worked with me on several municipal transparency projects back in my county days. Small world, especially when you've built a reputation for honest accounting and exposing financial fraud. The follow-up broadcast aired the next Thursday. Melissa Torres presented a balanced piece showing both properties, but Tracy's performance was pure comedy gold. She contradicted herself multiple times, grew defensive over simple questions, and accidentally admitted she'd never even tested the subdivision's well water, the same water she claimed to be protecting. Meanwhile, I provided calm, fact-based answers backed up by documentation. The visual contrast was striking. Tracy looked increasingly frantic while I sat there with binders full of evidence like some kind of bureaucratic superhero. Community response was overwhelmingly supportive. My voicemail filled up with neighbors thanking me for standing up to Tracy's bullying. Several admitted they'd been too afraid to speak out before, worried about retaliation through HOA violations. But Tracy wasn't done. Humiliated by the news coverage and facing questions about her past, she decided to go nuclear. The next Monday, the county health department showed up. Tracy had filed a complaint claiming my cabin's septic system was leaking into the lake, contaminating the watershed and threatening public health. She demanded an immediate cease and desist on all lake activities pending a full environmental investigation. The health inspector, a professional named Marcus, who actually knew what he was doing, arrived with proper credentials and legitimate authority. I welcomed him with full transparency, even offering coffee while he worked. When Marcus discovered my cabin used a state-of-the-art composting toilet system with zero sewage entering the lake, his reaction was not what Tracy had expected. This is actually an eco-friendly showcase, he told me, taking photos of the system. Mind if I get your contractor's information? I know several people who'd love something like this. Tracy's complaint was officially dismissed as frivolous and malicious language that would prove useful in future legal proceedings. The victory was sweet, but I knew this was just the beginning. Tracy was escalating faster than a rocket, and I had a feeling her next move would be even more desperate. If Tracy had any sense left, she would have backed down after the septic system fiasco. Instead, she doubled down like a gambler with a mortgage due and pocket aces that turned out to be a pair of twos. Friday afternoon, I was splitting firewood behind my cabin, the rhythmic thunk of the axe helping me think through Tracy's escalating madness, when I heard the familiar sound of a delivery truck grinding up my driveway. The postal worker looked apologetic as he handed me a certified letter thick enough to choke a horse. The return address made me laugh. Rutherford Stone, Charlotte's most expensive legal firm. Tracy had hired lawyers who charged $600 an hour to write threatening letters over parking disputes. The cease and desist demanded I stop all nuisance water activities that allegedly violated noise ordinances. According to their creative interpretation of municipal law, my swimming created excessive splashing sounds that disrupted the peaceful enjoyment of neighboring properties. They wanted $5,000 in mediation fees to avoid a lawsuit. I had to admire the creativity. Tracy was literally trying to find me for making splash sounds while swimming in my own lake. But the legal letter was just the opening act. Over the weekend, Tracy organized what I can only describe as a surveillance campaign. HOA members began creeping past my property at 5 miles per hour, taking photos and videos of everything I did. Someone left passive-aggressive notes on my truck windshield about respecting community standards and being a good neighbor. The county suddenly became very interested in my land. Building inspector Monday, fire marshal Tuesday, tax assessor Wednesday. Each visit triggered by anonymous complaints about potential violations. The stench of bureaucratic harassment hung in the air thicker than morning fog over the lake. During my municipal days, I'd seen this tactic before death by 1,000 paper cuts. The goal wasn't to find violations. It was to wear me down with endless harassment until I gave up and moved. But Tracy made a fatal mistake. She picked a fight with someone who knew how to follow paper trails. That weekend, I spent 2 days in the basement of the county records office, a place that smells like old paper and broken dreams. What I uncovered was better than Christmas morning. Tracy's subdivision had been built using an emergency wetlands permit, requiring a 25-foot buffer from all natural water sources. 3 houses, including Tracy's own McMansion, violated that buffer. The fines, $10,000 per day, plus possible demolition if the environmental impact was severe. But that wasn't even the best part. I also requested the HOA's financial statements under North Carolina's public records law, something any property owner within the association's jurisdiction can do. What I found made Earl's fake inspector credentials look like a parking ticket. Tracy had been treating the HOA treasury like her personal piggy bank. No competitive bidding for maintenance contracts despite state law requiring it over $10,000. Her husband Ron's landscaping company had an exclusive $45,000 annual deal. Pool maintenance went to her cousin Dean for $28,000, and legal fees included payments to her personal attorney for unrelated matters. Years ago, I'd worked a case where a municipal official used similar schemes. The key was documenting the pattern to show intent to defraud. Tracy had left a paper trail wider than Interstate 85. While I built my case, Tracy filed for a temporary restraining order against me. She claimed I was stalking HOA members and had threatened violence during our boundary dispute. The hearing was set for Tuesday morning. I hired Patricia, an attorney specializing in HOA disputes with a reputation for devouring corrupt boards for breakfast. Patricia reviewed my evidence and smiled the kind of smile that makes opposing counsel sweat. "Evan," she said, spreading the documents across her table, "Tracy's about to learn why you don't bring a knife to a gunfight." The court hearing was pure theater. Tracy arrived with 3 HOA members as witnesses, all in their Sunday best practicing concerned citizen expressions. I brought a binder of evidence heavy enough to anchor a boat. Judge Margaret Yates, a no-nonsense veteran with 30 years on the bench, reviewed the materials with forensic precision. Tracy's witnesses contradicted each other under basic questioning, and my security camera footage clearly showed who was doing the actual harassing. When Tracy's attorney tried presenting evidence of my threatening behavior, Patricia produced audio recordings of every interaction. Tracy's voice grew more unhinged in each clip, while mine stayed calm and professional. Judge Yates dismissed Tracy's restraining order request and issued a temporary protective order against Tracy, ordering the HOA to stop surveillance and trespassing. She also awarded me $2,500 in attorney's fees and warned Tracy about potential perjury charges for false statements. Tracy's meltdown in the courthouse parking lot made local news. She screamed at the judge about corruption and ranted about me destroying the community, loud enough to wake the dead. The newspaper headline the next day read, "HOA President's Courtroom Tantrum." That evening, several subdivision residents approached me privately. They revealed Tracy had harassed them. 2 pool parties shut down for noise. Garden decorations deemed architecturally inappropriate. Parking violations for guests staying more than 4 hours. Some were considering a recall petition to remove her. But while I savored the small victory, Patricia found something in the original HOA charter that changed everything. Hidden in dense legal language was a clause I'd missed, one that would shift the balance of power permanently. Any property owner within 1,000 feet of the subdivision could petition to join the HOA as a voting member. My lake property not only qualified geographically, but as the largest single parcel, I would control 30% of the voting shares. Tracy had been so focused on harassing me, She'd never realized I could simply join her little kingdom and vote her out. The irony was delicious. In her attempt to control my property, she'd handed me the keys to control hers. As Patricia prepared our next move, she uncovered even more. Karen's development violated the original county master plan, which allowed only 16 homes on the 95-acre parcel. Tracy's 47 McMansions exceeded density limits by over 300%. The developer bypassed this through an emergency housing shortage provision, created after Hurricane Florence, a temporary variance expiring in 6 months. If not renewed, 31 houses would have to be demolished. The remaining 16 homeowners would face skyrocketing monthly assessments from $320 to $940 per month. Most residents had no idea they were living atop a financial time bomb. But Patricia's discovery didn't stop there. She found that Tracy knew about the expiration all along. She'd been secretly lobbying for renewal, but her harassment campaign against me backfired spectacularly. I'd worked with several current planning commissioners who remembered me as the guy who followed procedure and exposed financial irregularities. Tracy's public meltdown and legal harassment had turned potential allies into enemies. Her odds of getting the variance renewed were now close to zero. And thanks to the HOA charter clause, I had the right to join as a voting member. My 4-acre property, assessed at $485,000 versus the subdivision's average $225,000 per home, meant I'd control 31% of all HOA decisions. I could block assessment hikes, call special elections, propose charter amendments, and demand full financial transparency. The irony was perfect. Tracy had spent months trying to control my property through HOA regulations. Now, I could join her HOA and control her. But as I stared at the documents, I realized something important. I didn't want to destroy the community. Many residents were victims of Tracy's schemes too. The real solution wasn't revenge. It was removing the cancer and healing the patient. My goal shifted from payback to restoration. Remove Tracy, fix the finances, and build a sustainable HOA that actually served its residents instead of feeding one person's power addiction. Tracy, meanwhile, had somehow learned that information about the zoning expiration was leaking. She called an emergency HOA meeting for the following Saturday, citing urgent financial matters that needed immediate attention. The meeting notice went out with barely any warning, a classic suppression tactic to limit attendance. I had 72 hours to file my HOA membership application and rally support from frustrated residents. Saturday morning would become the ultimate showdown for control of the community's future. Patricia and I spent the weekend preparing legal documents while I reached out to neighbors who'd spoken to me after the courthouse victory. The race was on, and the winner would control not just the HOA, but the financial fate of 47 families. We treated it like a military operation. Our first recruit was Janet Miller, a retired teacher who lived on Maple Court and had documented Tracy's overreach for 2 years. Janet had that quiet steel you see in veteran educators, the kind forged by decades of dealing with difficult parents and tight budgets. Tracy had fined her $200 for installing a non-conforming birdbath. Apparently, concrete doves violated the HOA's vision of suburban perfection. When I called Janet, her voice carried 20 years of bottled frustration. "Mr. Harper, I've been waiting for someone to stand up to that woman. What do you need?" Janet's spiral notebook contained 2 years' worth of violations, fines, and harassment incidents, organized with the precision of a grade book. Next was Robert Martinez, an accountant on Oak Ridge Drive who'd made the mistake of asking questions about HOA finances. Robert was the kind of numbers guy who notices when spending doesn't add up, a dangerous trait in Tracy's world of creative accounting. "I've been trying to review invoices for months," Robert told me over breakfast at the local diner, the smell of bacon and black coffee in the air. "Tracy says everything's proprietary, but I've found $43,000 in unexplained expenses just in this year's budget." Robert's spreadsheet showed financial irregularities that would make any auditor's pulse race. Landscaping bills that didn't match the work performed, equipment purchases with no delivery records, legal fees for matters unrelated to HOA business. Our third ally was Lisa Park, a civil engineer who had originally designed the subdivision's drainage system before Tracy modified the plans without proper permits. Lisa had the practical intelligence of someone who builds things that actually have to work. Tracy changed my drainage specs to save money, Lisa explained during our planning session at my cabin. Now her changes dump runoff directly toward your lake. The violations could shut down the entire subdivision if the state environmental agency gets involved. Lisa brought technical credibility, exactly what we needed to counter Tracy's emotional manipulation. Friday evening, we held our final strategy session around my kitchen table. Patricia had prepared 3 binders of evidence, each one meticulously organized for maximum impact. The plan was surgical: expose Tracy's financial fraud, reveal the zoning time bomb, and present my membership application as the solution to both. Robert would lead the financial presentation with simple, undeniable charts: $45,000 to Ron's landscaping company for work worth $18,000, $28,000 for pool maintenance, performed weekly instead of daily, legal fees that included Tracy's personal divorce attorney paid with HOA funds. Janet would read testimonials from harassed residents, illustrating the human toll of Tracy's power trip. Lisa would explain the infrastructure violations and environmental risks Tracy had hidden from everyone. During my years in municipal government, I'd learned people respond to stories more than statistics. We needed residents to see Tracy as the problem, not just a symptom of bad governance. Every violation, every fine, every petty act of harassment was part of a larger pattern designed to consolidate power and siphon money from the community. Patricia reviewed the legal procedures we'd have to follow. North Carolina HOA law allowed emergency board elections to be called by any member presenting evidence of financial mismanagement. My membership would give me standing to make that motion, and my 31% voting share would make it impossible for Tracy's supporters to block. We even prepared a backup plan. If Tracy tried to end the meeting early, Patricia would cite bylaw requirements obligating the board to address member concerns. If Tracy claimed I couldn't speak as a non-member, my application granted me immediate standing. If she called the police, all our documentation was legally obtained and we'd be on public property. Saturday morning arrived crisp and cool, the kind of October morning that makes everything feel possible. We gathered at my cabin at 7 a.m., 3 hours before the meeting. The smell of coffee and bacon mixed with nervous determination as we reviewed our final preparations. Someone has to stop her before she ruins this community, Janet said, hands trembling slightly. Numbers don't lie, and Tracy's numbers haven't told the truth in 3 years, Robert added. When residents see how much she's wasted, they'll understand why their fees keep going up, Lisa said, laying out drainage maps. I felt calmer than I had in months. After years of defending myself against Tracy's attacks, we were finally going on the offensive, armed with overwhelming evidence and legal authority. Patricia distributed copies of all documents and reminded everyone about Tracy's likely tactics: personal attacks, false accusations, emotional manipulation. The key, she said, is to stay focused on facts and let her behavior speak for itself. At 9:30, we loaded everything into Robert's van and headed to the community center. The taste of anticipation was sweet, mixed with the satisfaction of knowing we were ready. Tracy's reign of petty tyranny was about to end. The only question was whether she'd go quietly or drag the entire subdivision down in a blaze of narcissistic fury. The week leading up to our showdown, Tracy completely unraveled. Like a cornered animal with a law degree and a social media account, she launched what can only be described as a scorched earth campaign to destroy my reputation before I could destroy hers. It started Friday night with threatening texts to Janet. Spreading lies about HOA business is grounds for a defamation lawsuit, Tracy wrote at 11:47 p.m. Apparently, insomnia and desperation make excellent bedfellows. She followed up by calling Robert's accounting firm Monday morning, claiming he was misusing company resources to harass innocent community volunteers. The piece de resistance was her call to the state engineering board, reporting Lisa for professional misconduct, all because Lisa dared to point out Tracy's unpermitted drainage modifications. 3 women who had simply asked questions about their community were now facing professional retaliation from a power-drunk HOA president. But Tracy wasn't done. She filed another police report claiming I'd threatened violence during our property boundary dispute, conveniently forgetting that the entire interaction was captured on my security cameras. The officer who took the report was the same Deputy Campos who'd originally cited me for swimming, and his notes described Tracy's behavior as increasingly erratic and her accusation as lacking any evidence. Saturday morning brought Tracy's masterpiece of stupidity. I arrived early at the community center to find a handwritten sign taped to the door. Meeting relocated to 847 Maple Court due to security concerns. That was Tracy's garage. She had moved an HOA meeting for 47 households into her two-car garage, which could maybe hold 15 people if half of them were malnourished teenagers. The smell of motor oil and desperation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Patricia immediately objected, citing HOA bylaws requiring adequate meeting space for all members. Tracy responded by claiming that security threats required limited attendance. Apparently, transparency was now a public safety hazard. When residents started arriving and realized they'd be stuck standing in Tracy's driveway, unable to hear anything, the grumbling began. Nothing exposes petty tyranny like forcing your neighbors to stand outside in October weather because you're afraid of democracy. "You don't even live here," Tracy shrieked when I presented my membership application. The look on her face when Patricia explained my legal right to join under the original charter was priceless, like someone who just stepped on a landmine. Tracy's core supporters, including her husband Ron and cousin Dean, suddenly realized my 31% voting share would render their little power circle irrelevant. That's when Tracy's meltdown truly began. She screamed about illegal interference with a private association and claimed I'd forged documents and bribed county officials. The accusations grew more ridiculous by the second, including suggestions I was part of a conspiracy involving county commissioners, the state forestry department, and I kid you not, the Illuminati. Even her staunchest allies started backing away, uncomfortable with her unhinged ranting. Patricia invoked HOA Bylaw Article 12, which required a vote to relocate meetings if the current space was inadequate. During my municipal days, I'd seen similar tactics used to suppress public input. The solution was always the same: force a vote and let democracy do its work. With 23 residents present, the vote to move back to the community center was 18-5. Tracy refused to acknowledge the results, claiming only official board members could call meetings. Patricia cited state law showing that members could override board decisions when constitutional rights were being violated. That's when Tracy called the police. Deputy Campos arrived again, looking like a man who wished he were anywhere else. When Tracy demanded arrests for illegal assembly, he patiently explained this was a civil matter and suggested they work it out like adults, advice she promptly ignored. The crowd relocated to the community center, a public building where Tracy's suppression tactics no longer applied. 31 residents attended, the largest HOA turnout in the subdivision's history. The energy in the room felt electric, like a powder keg waiting for a spark. Tracy arrived 20 minutes late with her attorney on speakerphone, insisting the meeting was invalid due to the location change. Residents were visibly frustrated. They'd come for answers about finances and governance, not to watch their HOA president spiral into procedural chaos. I maintained my composure, taking notes as Tracy dug herself deeper with every objection. Homeowners started asking pointed questions about landscaping expenses, pool maintenance costs, and legal fees. Tracy's answers were evasive, contradictory, and increasingly desperate. When Robert stood up and asked about the $45,000 landscaping contract, Tracy claimed it was proprietary information and couldn't be discussed publicly. Robert produced public records showing the inflated billing, and Ron started sweating in the corner like a man watching his gravy train derail. Desperate to change the subject, Tracy launched a personal attack on me that would have made a political operative blush. She brought up Maya's death, suggesting I was mentally unstable and a danger to families. She accused me of stalking children and being a dangerous loner who threatened property values. The room fell silent. Even her supporters looked disgusted by her willingness to weaponize a widower's grief for political gain. Janet stood up, her voice trembling with anger. "Tracy, you fined me $200 for a birdbath. When did we become so cruel to our neighbors?" Other residents followed, sharing their own stories of harassment and intimidation. The dam had broken, and years of pent-up frustration poured out like water through a ruptured levee. Tracy tried to adjourn the meeting, but residents refused to leave. The taste of democracy was too sweet after years of authoritarian rule. I approached the podium with my binders of documentation, and Tracy made one last desperate stand. "I won't let you destroy our community," she screamed. "I'm not trying to destroy it," I replied calmly. "I'm trying to save it." The stage was set for the final confrontation. The week between the garage debacle and the final showdown, Tracy went fully nuclear. I mean full-scale, burn everything to the ground, desperate, the kind of meltdown that would have impressed Napoleon during his retreat from Moscow. She hired a private investigator, a sketchy ex-cop named Wade, who drove a beat-up sedan and wore cologne that smelled like cigarettes and regret. Wade started following me around town, snapping pictures through my cabin windows, and even approached my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, asking questions about my mental state and daily habits. Tracy's social media smear campaign escalated into pure fiction. She created fake profiles spreading rumors that I planned to build a commercial fishing operation that would destroy property values. She posted doctored screenshots of threatening messages supposedly from me, complete with intentional spelling errors to make them seem authentic. But the crown jewel of her smear effort was claiming that Maya had actually taken her own life and that I was covering it up to protect my reputation. Tracy had officially crossed into monstrous territory, weaponizing my wife's cancer battle for political gain. Even by her standards, this was a new low that would have impressed Stalin. While Tracy was busy torching her own credibility, I was assembling the final pieces of evidence that would end her reign for good. Robert Martinez found the smoking gun. Bank records showing Tracy had siphoned $85,000 from the HOA reserve fund to use as a down payment on a Myrtle Beach vacation condo. The withdrawal was recorded as emergency roof repairs for the community center. But the same day the money left the account, Tracy closed on Beach Breeze Condominiums Unit 247. Her social media posts from that weekend showed her celebrating at the beach, while homeowners believed their reserve fund was fixing infrastructure. The sheer brazenness was breathtaking, like robbing a bank and then posting vacation selfies with the stolen cash. Patricia was busy too, working with the county prosecutor to build a criminal case. Each fraudulent transaction carried a potential 10-year sentence under North Carolina's embezzlement statutes. Tracy wasn't just facing removal from the HOA board, she was staring down serious prison time. Meanwhile, Wade overplayed his hand. On Tuesday evening, Mrs. Patterson called the sheriff after catching him trespassing on her property, trying to peer into her windows. When deputies arrested Wade for intimidation and illegal surveillance, he immediately flipped to save himself, telling them Tracy had hired him to dig up compromising information on me. His confession was now part of the official criminal record. Thursday brought the final nail in the coffin. My own investigator, a reputable firm that didn't reek of cheap cologne, delivered a comprehensive report on Tracy's past. She had pulled nearly identical scams in 3 previous communities across California, Arizona, and Florida. The pattern was always the same: move in, take over the HOA, embezzle funds, create chaos, and vanish before prosecutors could catch up. 2 criminal cases were still pending from those previous communities, and there was a civil judgment for $127,000 she'd never paid. Tracy wasn't just a petty tyrant, she was a serial community destroyer. The morning of our final confrontation, I noticed a U-Haul trailer hitched to Tracy's BMW. She clearly planned to flee right after the meeting, probably with whatever money she could grab before the authorities arrived. The community center was packed beyond capacity. 67 residents showed up, more than had ever attended any HOA event. Melissa Torres and the Channel 7 crew were there, tipped off about the investigation. County Prosecutor Williams sat quietly in the back with Detective Hayes, ready to execute an arrest warrant as soon as Tracy incriminated herself on camera. Deputy Campos was stationed outside, knowing Tracy's history of explosive behavior when cornered. Tracy walked in wearing expensive new jewelry, definitely bought with HOA funds, and tried to control the meeting from the start, limiting discussion and citing security concerns as an excuse for an abbreviated agenda. But when I requested recognition under Robert's Rules of Order, Patricia stood and presented my completed HOA membership documentation. The review period expired yesterday, she announced clearly. Mr. Harper is now an official HOA member with a 31% voting share. Tracy's face went white as the power dynamic shifted in real time. The room buzzed with energy as residents realized she no longer controlled their community's future. I stepped up to the podium carrying 3 binders of evidence, speaking with the calm authority of someone who'd spent 2 decades exposing municipal corruption. I'd like to present some financial irregularities for board review, I said. You can't discuss confidential HOA business, Tracy screeched, her voice reaching a pitch that probably scared every dog in the next county. I turned toward the news camera and smiled. Ma'am, embezzlement isn't confidential. It's criminal. Robert took the floor with his accountant's precision, slicing through years of financial fog like a lighthouse beam through storm clouds. The first slide showed Ron Willard's landscaping company, billed $67,000, actual work valued at $23,000. This represents a systematic pattern of inflated billing, Robert explained to a stunned audience. Pool maintenance billed for daily service, actual visits were weekly. Legal fees included payments to Tracy's personal divorce attorney. Tracy lunged for Robert's laptop like a rabid wolverine, screaming that the numbers were lies and fabrications. Her frantic attempts to shut down the presentation only made her look more guilty as security camera footage showed HOA funds being transferred directly into her personal accounts. Several residents gasped when the Beach Breeze condo purchase appeared on screen, $85,000 withdrawn for emergency repairs, same day as her condo closing. Her social media post celebrating that weekend sealed the case. That's when my investigators' report twisted the knife. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, advancing to the next slides, meet Tracy Willard, also known as Tracy Willard Johnson, serial community destroyer. The room erupted in shocked murmurs as her true identity and past were revealed. 3 previous communities left in ruins by identical schemes. Criminal charges pending in California for grand theft and fraud, a civil judgment in Arizona for $89,000 in restitution still unpaid. Tracy's complete meltdown began in earnest. She screamed that everything was lies and conspiracies while her remaining supporters slipped quietly toward the exits. Grabbing the microphone, her voice cracked with desperation. This man is dangerous. He threatened to poison our water supply. He's been stalking children. The accusations grew more absurd by the second. Then she produced a clearly forged mental health evaluation, complete with the wrong doctor's license number. It was so blatantly fake that several residents actually laughed out loud. That's when County Prosecutor Williams rose from his seat, his badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. Mrs. Willard, he said firmly, I'm Prosecutor Williams. You are accused of embezzling $127,000 from your neighbors. The Channel 7 camera crew surged closer as Tracy realized she'd just committed perjury and made false accusations on live television. Her face cycled through a spectrum of colors that would have put a mood ring to shame. This is illegal surveillance, she shrieked, lunging at the camera crew. You can't record me without permission. The sound of her designer heels slipping on the polished floor as she stumbled was almost comedic if the situation weren't so serious. Detective Hayes approached with handcuffs, reading her Miranda rights as Tracy screamed about conspiracies and illegal persecution. The charges were read clearly for the cameras: embezzlement, fraud, filing false police reports, and witness intimidation. Each charge carried significant prison time, and the evidence was overwhelming. As Tracy was led away in handcuffs, still shrieking threats at anyone within earshot, the community center fell into stunned silence. Deputies searched the U-Haul trailer and found stolen HOA property, including a commercial-grade lawnmower and pool equipment worth thousands. Once the police cars disappeared into the night, I addressed the shell-shocked residents. I never wanted to destroy this community, I said, my voice steady and echoing in the quiet room. I wanted to save it. The applause started slowly from Janet Miller, then spread like wildfire. People were crying, hugging, and releasing years of pent-up frustration and relief. I proposed an immediate emergency vote to remove Tracy from all HOA positions, which passed unanimously since her proxy votes were now invalid. A temporary board was elected on the spot, Robert as treasurer, Janet as secretary, and Lisa Park as president. When someone asked if I wanted a board position, I declined with a smile. "I'd rather be an advisor," I said. "My lake is always open for community fishing, and I think it's time we started acting like neighbors instead of adversaries." The meeting ended with something I hadn't seen in years: neighbors talking like human beings instead of property value warriors. Tracy's reign of petty tyranny was over, and democracy had won with receipts, documentation, and one very expensive U-Haul full of evidence. Justice served with a side of financial accounting and a healthy dose of community solidarity. The best part? It was all completely legal, thoroughly documented, and captured on camera for posterity. Sometimes the good guys really do win, especially when they bring better lawyers and actual evidence. 6 months later, I was sitting on my dock watching kids learn to fish while their parents chatted like old friends. The smell of grilling burgers from our first annual Lake Day festival drifted across the water, mixing with the pine scent and the sound of genuine laughter, something this neighborhood hadn't heard in years. Tracy received 4 years in state prison after pleading guilty to avoid trial. Asset forfeiture recovered most of the stolen money, including her precious beach condo, which was seized faster than you could say emergency roof repairs. Her husband, Ron, was extradited from Oklahoma and sentenced to 18 months for conspiracy, while fake Inspector Earl received probation and a permanent ban from government work. The new HOA board launched what we called the Transparency Revolution. All financial records are now posted online monthly. Competitive bidding is required for any contract over $1,000. Quarterly town halls replaced Tracy's secretive board meetings. We repealed every one of her oppressive rules, transforming the covenant from a weapon of harassment into real guidelines for neighborly living. The looming zoning disaster that could have destroyed 31 homes was resolved through genuine cooperation. I used my municipal connections to help navigate the variance renewal process, working with county planners to design a sustainable development plan that protected both the environment and property values. The community now enjoys permanent grandfathered status, and 15 problematic houses were relocated at the developer's expense to comply with environmental standards. My lake became the heart of our healing neighborhood. Maya's Sanctuary, named after my late wife, now hosts fishing lessons for kids, canoe storage, and peaceful evening swims for anyone who needs the same kind of therapy I once did. The dock my grandfather built in 1952 has been expanded to welcome the entire community, and the sound of children laughing over the water would have made Maya smile. The ripple effect spread far beyond our subdivision. Melissa Torres's investigative series won a regional Emmy, and the story went viral with the headline, "How One Man Saved His Community from HOA Tyranny." I even testified before the state legislature about HOA accountability reform, helping draft what became known as the Tracy Act legislation, requiring annual independent audits and transparent financial reporting for all HOAs. 3 other neighborhoods reached out for help with their own corrupt boards, and I found a new calling I'd never expected. There's something deeply satisfying about using 20 years of municipal finance experience to help neighbors reclaim their communities from petty dictators who think property ownership comes with feudal privileges. The financial recovery exceeded everyone's expectations. Between asset seizures, insurance claims, and recovered property, we ended up with more money than before Tracy's crime spree. Monthly assessments dropped to $180 lower than when she took power, and our reserve fund is healthier than ever. Property values increased by 12% after her removal, proving that good governance and genuine community spirit are far better for real estate than authoritarian rule and constant litigation. Who would have thought that treating neighbors like people would make a neighborhood more desirable? Personally, the lake that saved my sanity after Maya's death has become something even more meaningful, a symbol of healing and shared purpose. Grief will always be part of me, but channeling that pain into helping others has given life new meaning. Just last week, I received a call from a desperate homeowner in Tennessee. Another HOA corruption story involving a veteran whose disability modifications were being blocked by a power-hungry board president. "Sir, I heard about what you did in North Carolina," the voice said, trembling with frustration and hope. "My HOA is trying to fine me for installing wheelchair ramps." I looked out at my lake where Janet Miller was teaching her granddaughter to cast a fishing line while Robert grilled burgers for the monthly cookout. The sound of neighbors enjoying each other's company filled the evening air like music. "Tell me everything," I said, already reaching for my notebook. "Let's see what we can do." Because here's what I learned from this entire experience. Petty tyrants only win when good people stay silent. But when neighbors band together with proper documentation, legal knowledge, and the courage to fight back, justice isn't just possible, it's inevitable. The best revenge against corrupt authority isn't more corruption. It's building something better together. If you've got your own HOA nightmare story, share it in the comments. I read every single one, and trust me, Tracy wasn't even the worst I've heard. And hey, if this story helped you think differently about standing up to petty tyrants in your own life, hit that subscribe button, because more community justice stories are on the way. Next week's story? An HOA president tried to steal a veteran service dog, and you will not believe how that ends. Sometimes the good guys really do win, especially when they bring receipts, solid legal representation, and the unshakable belief that neighbors deserve better than life under narcissistic bullies. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some trout to feed and a community to enjoy.